Good morning.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Joe, how are you? How's it
I'm
going?
wonderful. Nice to meet you.
I love your painting in the background. That's cool.
Oh, thank you. Do me a favor when we're done with this.
Yeah.
Send me your address and I'll mail you something.
Sure.
Uh, yeah. So no, that's a painting that I'm a visual artist too. That's a painting that I did, and the actual one is in my wife's fifth grade classroom now.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So it's good for sure. Well, hey man, where are you located?
I'm in Eagle Rock, California, which is just really LA. But
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Right on. Well, hey man, it's great to meet you. Before we get into your life, there's so much that goes into what you do and the timeline that you've traveled down professionally. So before we, right? So before we get there, I want to know, how did you survive COVID? The last 3 years was quite a thing. How did you get through it? And how has it changed you now?
Wait, now hold on. Is this part of the interview?
Oh yeah, I should have prefaced that I come from jazz radio, so I tend to just dive right in. So
Okay.
yeah, I usually hop in.
I wasn't sure if this was a precursor or a. So do you want to go ahead and just ask that again?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So you've had such a timeline here in your life, in your professional life. Before we get there, I want to get to COVID. How did you survive the last 3 years? And how has it changed the way that you live your life now?
Oh, wow. Well, one of the main things is that just as COVID was hitting, my wife was in the midst of breast cancer.
Wow.
And I think she went in for her mastectomy. She had a double mastectomy. So she went in for that 5 days before the shutdown.
Wow.
And we were incredibly lucky on numerous accounts. Number one, that everything went well with her double mastectomy, and then she ended up with radiation, which we did during COVID. But she's now cancer free. In
Right.
fact, she just had her reconstructive surgery and is recovering from that. So,
Right.
but I mean, so really, it's wild that COVID and all of that were sort of wrapped up into one. And so we've come out the other side. We're still married. We're stronger. We're everything's great. She's alive and doing fantastic. So the other parts of COVID. I mean, in a way, COVID. We were already sort of nesting when COVID when starting to happen, and it was just a progression of that for us.
So talk to me a little bit about, let's get to the essence of what you do on a regular daily basis. It's one thing to have it on paper, but it's another thing to hear it kind of explained a little bit. So I'm going to put you in front of
Sure.
a bunch of third graders at a career day. And one of the kids looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I am the one who calls roll sound, and I echo cut, and and on either side of those, I'm the one making sure that everything happens on time and on schedule on a film set.
Wow. That has to be intense.
It's pretty intense, yes.
So
It's fun, but it's very intense, yes.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, probably adrenaline all the time. So what did you want to be when you were in the third grade? What was your dream?
I actually wanted to be an oceanographer.
Wow. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
that can still happen, right?
yeah, I guess I grew up in Oklahoma, right, which is a landlocked state,
Yeah.
and Oklahoma has two things. I think it has the most volume of man-made lakes in the nation, which you
Wow.
wouldn't think, man-made lakes. So we're not counting the Great Lakes; those aren't man-made, but man-made lakes. Lakes that people have dammed up and made, and ponds and all sorts of. So it's landlocked, but it's got a lot of water in it.
Yeah.
And the second was it's got a lot of wind. And so as a kid, I was like, I want to get away from this wind. Where can I go? I could go underwater. It's ironic that I've actually never gotten my scuba certification. But I love water. I was a springboard diver in college, and so that sort of fulfilled my desire to be an oceanographer. But I guess when I think oceanographer, I then transitioned to film and being interested in visuals, and how to tell a story through visuals. And that, living in Oklahoma, that became my thing. I loved animation. I made some little animated shorts with claymation when I was in high school and then in college, and that propelled me into the film business.
So talk to me a little bit about who's been kind of an inspiration or a hero for you in your life, for your pursuits professionally and otherwise.
Well, my dad, number one. My dad was he was he was an entrepreneur extraordinaire. I mean, he owned a lawn sprinkler company when I was a little kid, and then at one point he sold that, and then he bought a bakery. And now my dad never baked anything in his life, but he was a businessman. And so he ran the bakery as a business, right? And he had a baker that was on staff that baked everything for him. And then he did all sorts of real estate stuff in Oklahoma, and he ended up implementing, he and his partner ended up implementing a sales tax, getting a sales tax passed in Oklahoma. And I think it's like 0.5% or something that goes toward the zoo. That was, they love the zoo. And he was on the board of directors and the Zoological Society. And so he created this tax that was 35 years ago, and it's still flowing right through the zoo. And so I mean, that's part of his legacy.
Yeah.
And so and he was an amazing storyteller. And his story of choice was the long joke or the story joke. He would tell a joke that, I mean, would go on for a minute or two, or sometimes 4 or 5 minutes. It's the kind of joke when you get to the end, the punchline sometimes is a groaner, but the joke isn't about the punchline. It's about the journey of the joke and the physicality that he gave the characters and the fun voices that he'd give the characters. And so I learned a lot and emulated a lot from my dad, Ron Rosser.
So let me ask you this. What was the first film that you saw that made you think, I want to do that someday? I want to be on a set, and that I want that to be my life.
Well, there are two films. Number one, when I think I was 6 or 7 years old, my parents, I want to say dragged me, but I didn't know where I was going. But so they took me to see 2001: A Space Odyssey
Wow.
in the theater. Now, I have no idea what prompted them to take a 6 or 7 year old kid to see 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm not sure what they thought it was going to be. And I can't remember what they did with my brother, who was 2 years younger. Maybe I left him sleeping in the car. I don't know, but it made an impression on me. I can remember. I can still to this day, and I've seen the film numerous times since then. I took my daughter a few years ago for the 50th anniversary. She was 17 at the time, I think. But I can remember sequences of that movie still embedded in my retinas. And then the second movie was a movie called Aguirre, the Wrath of God. And I saw it when I was a freshman in college. And it was directed by Werner Herzog. And Werner Herzog is a documentarian, and so he does documentary films, and he also does narrative films. And this film, if you haven't seen it, and it's incredible. It's about the quest for gold back in, I think, the 1600s, the Spaniards, and Klaus Kinski plays this crazy guy, just driving his crew of folks to into the depths of the Amazon. And I remember seeing that movie, and the opening shot is a shot looking through the hills, these mountains of the Andes, and it's this group of probably 40 people in 1600s garb traipsing through on some sort of a trail. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, is this one of Herzog's documentaries? Is this real? And I remember thinking, wow, he has set this up. The camera wasn't, it wasn't placed on angles. It was just sort of there documenting this incident. And so he really treated it as though it was sort of a documentary, but it was completely fictitious. I mean, he had created it from scratch. And that movie made a big impression on me in terms of the possibility of making how you can make something look incredibly real when it's just staged.
Yeah. What's been one of the most memorable sets you've been on? I'm sure you've been on many, many, many different projects, but is there one that kind of stands out or a few where it's like, wow, I was there and it was incredible?
Yeah, I worked on the show 24 for 8 years, and that set. I mean, every single week we were blowing something up or flipping a car, or doing some major stunt, and in fact, the first week, I think the first day we killed like 11 people with gunfire, and then the next day we smashed 11 plate glass windows, a la Die Hard. And then we jumped a motorcycle, and on Friday we had a skydiver come down from a plane at night in the desert. And I remember walking back to my car with with another crew member and saying, "This ain't no TV show. This is a movie
Yeah.
every single week. This
What
is
it,
pretty credible."
what an interesting concept that show was. It was mind-bending because you're just like,
It really
wow,
was.
this is 24 hours. You kidding me? There's
Yeah.
just so much. The thing that most people, a lot of Hollywood permeates our consciousness. It comes in through story, it comes in through tabloid, paparazzi, and all these
Hmm.
different things. But as someone that works on the inside, what is it about that culture that maybe people don't realize that is comforting, that is welcoming?
Well, this is sort of a two-pronged answer. Something that's welcoming, but it's also it can also be difficult. Is when we're filming, we're filming 12, 13, 14 hours. We'll very regularly go 7 a.m. call, and we have a 30-minute or an hour long lunch, and we do 12 hours. So that's we're finishing up at 8 p.m. Right, for a 7 a.m. call. We finish up at 8 p.m. And then various folks have commutes on either side, varying commutes. So I mean, one of the things is we're there together. I mean, on a film set, we're spending more time with each other than we are with our families, and so we become a group. And the other thing is, we're typically on the move, unless you're on a show that just takes place on a stage. If you're filming on location, it's a bit of a carnival atmosphere, in terms of, okay, you've got what we call the circus, which is the base camp, and that's all the trucks and trailers and everything, for makeup and hair and wardrobe and all the cast members. And it has to have some place to go every single time we go out, and so what you end up with is this sort of camaraderie that is ingrained over the course. And it's also wild because you may work with someone for 8 years on 24, and then there's some folks that on 24 that, since it finished and I moved on, I haven't worked with them. And
Yeah.
so it's a bit of a carnival atmosphere without the Barker and the snow cones.
Yeah. I back in 2003, there was a good friend of mine who actually is in Germany now and he does documentary films. He did a film called Beer Jesus and there's been other notable films. And I remember doing a documentary with him and I was just doing production stuff. I had a bit role in it. It actually did really good in the Kansas City Film Festival. But anyways, it was
Hmm.
12-hour days. I never, ever felt that level of exhaustion like I did after that.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. But another thing that you brought up, which was you said story, at one point, when you were talking about the stories of that these shows are creating. And it's interesting because that's one of the things that I've taken away from my experience in the film and TV business is, I've been creating stories through film, TV, commercials, music videos for 30 some odd years. And I realized along the way the value and importance of story in everyday life. So in other words, you've got a story like 24 where you've got these cliffhangers and these ups and downs and this tension. And I started realizing, oh my gosh, there are uses for these story techniques in everyday life.
Mhm.
And when I would go into a job interview for my next show, I realized, I'd tell a story about 24 or another show, and it would help me nail the job interview. And so what I've done is I've stepped back and created curriculums for students of all ages and really just folks of all ages. It started off with elementary school, but now I do consulting work with entrepreneurs, startups, ongoing companies, colleges, and community colleges. And so what I've done is create these curriculums that basically get folks telling stories, but everyday sort of stories, jokes, story jokes, or tall tales, or an urban legend, or with the kids, it's a ghost story or a spooky story. And what happens is the folks have so much fun telling these stories, coming up with them, and figuring out how to tell a compelling urban legend. And then we take those techniques, and then we use that as a template for how the folks can use those storytelling techniques in their daily life, in their personal life and professional life. And so ultimately, for college students, we come up with a story that they can have in their back pocket in a job interview that can tell and show the interviewer that they're responsible, that they can think on their feet, that they can communicate on the fly. And so they end up having this tool, this resource to fall back on when they're either in a job interview or they're pitching a project, or asking for funding, running a team, or speaking with a group of folks. Anywhere from a story can be told to one person, or it can be told to a group of 2 or 3 or 400 people, as at some sort of an event.
So you've probably met a lot of people over time, that a lot of
Yes.
people would like to meet. But if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend some time with them, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. My gosh. It it might be Prince.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I had a chance to see Prince and I blew it. I was in Atlanta working on a commercial, and I had like a 5:30 a.m. call the next day, and I was walking back to my hotel from the restaurant that I'd eaten dinner at, and I was just on my own because I was in a new city, and I walked by this shopping center, and everyone was out in the parking lot, and I walked up and I said, "What the heck is going on here?" And they said, "Oh, Prince is playing." And I could have, it was like 9:30. I knew he probably wasn't going on until 11 or something. I don't know. And I just sort of said, "No, not tonight, another time." And that was my chance to see him. And I think he is such an incredible person. I mean, I don't know if some of your listeners may be fans, some may be like, who cares? But he played 26 different instruments
Yeah,
on his first album,
yeah.
or some of his first few albums. And he was an incredible songwriter,
Mhm.
singer, visionary. And so I really, that's one of my regrets in terms of musical experiences, was missing seeing him. But also I would love to just sit down and hang and
Yeah,
talk about. One of the things I love is I love the creative process,
yeah.
and I'm a fairly process oriented person, and that's part of what's driven my programs and workshops and seminars in story and storytelling, is because I love the creative process, and I'm always looking at uh, how can we communicate better, how can we communicate more efficiently, and it's really interesting to see people who say, "No, I'm terrible at storytelling."
You
And I have these little exercises that I've come up with for breakout sessions, and when we do those, I see people who say, I'm not a storyteller. They come up with the most amazing stories that,
Wow.
in fact. So one of the exercises that we do is, have you ever heard of Hemingway's 6 word story?
Yeah.
Okay, so for your listeners who may not know about the Hemingway 6 word story, basically Hemingway came up. He thought, okay, what's the shortest story that I could tell? And he came up with 6 words. And his 6 word story goes, "Baby shoes for sale, never worn." And you hear baby shoes for sale, and I think of these sort of, these little white leather shoes with scuff marks all over because the baby used, and then you hear baby shoes for sale, and then I start to visualize these shoes. And then when I hear never worn, I then have to backtrack on that visualization and think, wait a second, they weren't worn. They don't have the scuff marks. So I take those away. And in fact, they were never worn. Maybe they still have a little tag on them that's, through the eyelet. And what happened? That the baby never wore these shoes.
Yeah.
Was it a miscarriage? Did they lose the child? And your mind starts to fill in where 6 words started off the story, but all of a sudden our minds are filling in. And so what I do is, as a precursor to the story, is I have everyone in the workshop or seminar think of a sense memory from their childhood, something that they remember hearing, smelling, tasting, seeing. And someone might come up with, oh, my mom used to fix little hush puppies, right, those little cornmeal little things, and I remember the smell or the sound of them in the frying. And another girl, a woman, came up with her mom used to rub her forehead. And so, I have them come up with these sense memories, and then I tell the 6-word story, and then I have them combine the two. So they tell a 6-word story about their sense memory. Yeah. And what it does is it gives folks a real quick reference point for this story. Because in my experience, when you say to someone, hey, write a 6-word story, okay, it's sort of like you asking, what one person would you want to hang with if you could hang with one person? I mean, all of a sudden I'm going through all the possibilities, and I'm thinking, okay, well, do I want to answer Prince? Is that a good answer? And so what it does is, with this sense memory, it focuses their attention on what their 6-word story is going to be about, and they don't have to worry about making that decision. And we had one guy, he told us a 6-word story about he and his father and the only time they ever hugged. And so out of these really short stories, and I do this for a reason. I mean, I chose a 6-word story for a reason. Number one, when we're doing a seminar or workshop, time is of the essence. We're trying to be efficient, but also when we're creating, it's always more difficult to create something that's short and sweet, but it's short and sweet. And so I find that if people can create a 6-word story that resonates, then when they're tasked with creating a story to emphasize points in a speech, or they're running a team and they're trying to bond with that team, then they can use this exercise as a springboard, as a jumping off point to figure out how and what and why and what sort of story will work for when they need to tell a story to persuade or entertain or educate in either in personal life or professional life.
So of all of these things that you've done in your life, what are you the proudest of?
I'm probably proudest of the fact that so I wrote a children's book, and I started going out and promoting it, doing school assemblies, and then I transformed it, I adapted it into a musical, because I had seen my kids in all sorts of musicals. And I was like, you know what? My book would be great as a musical. And now I'm a musician. I'm not a composer, but I'm a musician. So I play keyboards and percussion, but I'm not a composer. So I connected up with a friend who is a composer, and we created this musical, and it actually has been performed by numerous schools and children's drama programs, but also drama programs for children. And in fact, it had run for about a year and a half at the Snapple Theater off Broadway. It was at 51st and Broadway in New York City. And so I'd have to say, of all the things I've done, of all the TV shows I've worked on, it was this musical that I created and went out there and lived its own life. And oh my gosh, the joy on the faces of the kids when they were watching, because it's a family musical based on my children's book. When they were at this musical watching, it was pure magic, absolute magic.
That's wonderful. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life up to this point. What
Hmm.
would you tell that young version of you?
Oh boy. Um, Follow your passions. It's and and enjoy it along the way. Take some deep breaths, and just try to let the, as they say, don't sweat the small stuff. Try to let the small stuff go, and enjoy harnessing your passions.
So of all of in the annals, the very thick annals of film that have come out of Hollywood, if you could have worked on one of them, been there firsthand, what film would you have loved to have worked on?
Probably Jaws.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think they had any idea it was gonna be as big as it was?
No, no. In fact, Spielberg. Rumor has that Spielberg thought he was going to get fired at like three or four different points along the way. And uh, I mean, he was only. I think he was 26 when he directed that movie.
Wow.
And yeah, yeah. And the shark, named Bruce, it didn't work correctly. They were forever having to, jettison and move to something else, right? Normally a film or TV show, we have what we call rain days, right? Where it looks like the forecast is going to rain, and so we figure out what our cover sets are going to be, and so we make a decision at a certain point. Sometimes you might say, okay, well, we could shoot this in the rain. So if it's sprinkling, or if it's coming down a little light, we could shoot the scene, but and we're going to go for it. And it may just poor cats and dogs, and you end up going, okay, we're moving to cover, right? So invariably, you're always looking for a cover set when, especially on the East Coast. If you're filming in the East Coast, you always got to have a cover set just to cover yourself. And so on Jaws, they were having to run for cover. I mean, they were shooting mostly outside because it was on the beach, but they were running for cover because the shark wasn't working. Invariably they have a big sequence where they're on the boat and it's supposed to come up and almost eat them, and it would malfunction, and they'd say, okay, all right, we're gonna shift gears and we're gonna do that scene, the talking scene on the bow of the ship. I mean, so they were forever during that entire production, and I think it went. I think it went double of what it was supposed to do in terms of the number of days of shooting, and in no small part because of the shark that didn't work.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the cool part is because the shark didn't work as well as they thought, they weren't able to cut as much of it in to the finished product as I think they probably would have if it had worked. I mean, if it had worked, there would be much more of the shark. And so you get these fleeting glimpses, and I mean, editors are famous for using every single frame that they can, right? I mean, they're probably like, okay, and it's going, boom, and it works, and then it dies, or a rod pops out of the side of it or something, and so I'm sure they used every single frame that was possible from
Yeah.
what ultimately worked. But it's great. That movie is so scary because you don't see the shark all the time. I mean, they have that device of the barrels, right? And it goes down with the barrels, and it's taken one barrel and two barrels and three barrels. It's taken four barrels down, and I've never seen a shark do this. And that is a substitute for seeing the shark.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to storytelling techniques, right? Um, we as storytellers, I mean, we've been working on the ability to tell stories for 10,000 years as human beings. And think about what we've come up with in that time. There's so many storytelling techniques and so many psychological concepts and theories that work within storytelling. Joe, one of the really cool ones is it's called narrative transport. So basically, any storyteller is hoping to transport their listener, viewer, audience into a world, right? So if we think of a book, take Harry Potter. when we sit down to read Harry Potter, we're getting to know the characters, and then when we get to Hogwarts, and all of a sudden the beeper's going off because our pizza's done and it's burning in the oven, and there's someone at the door knocking for a delivery, and we don't even hear that, and everything just falls away because we're so absorbed in Hogwarts and all these characters. It's transported us to a place, to a time, to a world that only exists inside these pages. And same thing with a movie or even songs. I mean, there are songs that can transport us so that we're not even aware of where we are.
Yeah.
And so that concept of narrative transport is what we're all trying to do as storytellers with our audience. And again, whether the audience is one, if you and I are out to lunch and you say, hey, what'd you do this past weekend? I want to tell you a fun story that, and it's only for entertainment purposes.
Yeah.
But I want to tell you a fun story, and then maybe you and I, replicate that in a couple of weeks. We go, for a hike or whatever I did. But it's all about, transporting your audience to that place.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think that I am an energetic person who loves discovery and exploration and wants to bring people along on that journey and of the creative process through storytelling.
This has been fascinating. Before we get out of this door here, this digital door, where can people find out more about you, your curriculum, your children's book, anything revolving around your world? Where can they go?
Sure. My website is aiexplained.ai. See, we didn't even have time to jump into AI. I've coined the phrase AI enhanced storytelling. And so folks can go there and find out more about me. I have a book. It's called ChatGPT Simplified. It's for non-professionals who want to get up to speed in terms of what this amazing technology can do, but it's told through a storyteller's eyes or lens. And so aiexplained.ai. You can check out my stuff there and shoot me a note down at the bottom. You can send me an email, and we can figure out what we could do in terms of the possibilities.
So final question, with AI, and you mentioned 2001 and all of that, are you afraid, or is it something that we just have to figure out and it's going to be wondrous?
Yes, I'm afraid.
Okay.
And yes, it's going to be incredible. I view AI as a tool, just as a calculator is a tool for a mathematician or an engineer. And it's an incredible tool that can work on so many levels. From a creative standpoint, it can help us brainstorm and outline and organize and create content that we could never have done before. And it's like a paintbrush on steroids. It's like a computer on steroids. It's incredible technology, but like any technology, Oppenheimer is coming out this week, and I think AI is somewhat similar to that in terms of the positives and the negatives, and we need governments and the companies themselves to work on regulation to ensure that the bad actors who might use this technology for ill will are prevented from doing so, or we mitigate those possibilities.
Absolutely. Well, I think we scratched the surface and gave everyone a good taste of your world. So hopefully everyone runs out, gets involved with the books and your world. Richard, thank you so much for opening up. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Take care.